today, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives to be here with us today to learn and grow, both individually and collectively. So we appreciate you. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And you'll notice a theme throughout the morning is that we're going to be asking ourselves the same 3 questions. And these questions are important for us to consider for the learning today, but more importantly, what impact do these 3 questions have for us as learners outside of this space? I don't know what I should do. So the first question that we need to ponder is, who are we? Who are we as a math network? Who are we as a table group? Who are we as a grade level team? Why are we doing this? What's the importance of this? What is the essence and core of this practice? And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, why are we doing this in this way? So throughout the morning, we're going to be revisiting these 3 questions to make sure that we're understanding the purpose of the actions and events that are occurring, but how might these 3 questions transcend this space and go back into your building as well? So you'll notice the 7 norms are projected on the screen. I invite you to read through those. So our purpose in revisiting the norms, these norms establish our culture and how we communicate with one another and what those expectations are. And today our primary focus is going to be on paying attention to self and others. And we're going to think of this as a dance. So we can be down on the dance floor and we can be dancing and having our different moves on the dance floor. That's you speaking and connecting with your colleagues overall. But it's also important for us to step up on the balcony and just watch that dance floor. What are the moves that are happening? What are the themes and trends, and what is the feel of that space? And how am I contributing through my dance moves on that floor? So we're both on the dance floor and we're on the balcony. Part of the awareness we need to have is balancing participation. We know when we're dancing, it's a lot of fun to have our little clique out there and be doing our own thing. However, it's better when there's a whole group, a diverse group on the dance floor, and then you can just kind of melt in and it doesn't matter what your moves look like because everyone's out there having fun. So how are we being conscious of inviting others into the conversation? I see some of you smiling. Restrain my impulses with dancing. So it's important that we're conscious of the moves, and when we think about something that we want to interject or we want to throw into the space, what impacts might that have on others is something we need to be mindful of. How will my moves influence the collective conversation taking place? And then lastly, there are things that we need to be aware of. We can't be bumping into people. We need to be conscious of when the song actually stops, and we can stop dancing as well. So how are we being conscious of the flow of the conversation and where the focus of the conversation is leading to? We each contribute to that productive space. The 3 goals for our year are projected on the screen. We're going to be revisiting these throughout, but I invite you to read through them at this time. So although these 3 goals have been the same throughout the year, we can think of this like our unit. These are our unit goals, and we're going to transfer into what today's lesson might look like, an orientation towards that unit goal as well. So you'll notice on the top left of the screen, those are actors. They have a specific role. And so when we take on a new role, we have to formulate a new identity. And once we have that identity, our behaviors need to reflect that. So what is our role in this space? What is our role at our building? And how are our behaviors reflective of our identities? I invite you to read through the learning intention and success criteria. Secondly, you'll notice that there are 2 little girls doing a design challenge in this space. what we present to students, the activities that students engage in, that formulates their identity and relationship with that context. Are we using time tests to show students that math is about efficiency and being fast and not having multiple access points? Or are we thinking more creatively about how can we open up this assignment overall and let students engage in that productively so they can think about their relationship with math with the schema that they hold? The second, learning intention and success criteria. And then lastly, and most importantly, we need to see people as humans. It's not about the content that we teach. We don't teach content. We teach students content. Students need to come first and foremost in all that we do in connecting with them as individuals so that they can build those productive relationships. So our three themes for the day, our lesson, so to speak, is oriented towards our unit goals as well, and we will be revisiting these. So we're going to transition at this time to unpack the agenda. And Andrew, would you mind sharing the first item?
So we have been living in the world of welcoming you. So if you're just joining us, feel free to refill on coffee and grab a donut.
The second stage, which we were engaging in just a moment, unpacking our year. This is the fifth and final MichME event in mid-May. What connections are we making to the previous learning, and where does that leave us moving forward?
Last time we were together, we started talking about independent and dependent learners. And so today we will take that background knowledge that we hold walking into this space, and we will co-construct knowledge with our peers around independent and dependent learners.
Next on the agenda is collective teacher efficacy. We're going to have an opportunity to engage in authentic learning through a video. And we're just going to hear from a member's story and identify what connections we're making to that person's story and what impacts that might have on us.
Before we take an opportunity to reflect, we're going to gather some feedback from all of you because we utilize your voices and your feedback to improve our craft. So we'll invite you later on this morning to inform us about how the year went and how this morning went so that we can continue to grow.
And lastly is reflection. So we've been on this wonderful journey, this ride, but is that plane landing or is that plane taking off at this time? We'll take an opportunity to say, what does closure look like for us?
So we're going to take some time to unpack the year, the journey that we have been on. Before we do that, we're going to step out and we're going to talk about someone that's really important in my life. This is Corey Tao. Corey was a student of mine when I taught kindergarten. And when you look at Corey, there's a lot of assumptions that you can make based on appearance. So one might assume that he was swimming because he is wrapped in a towel and has goggles on his head. Another assumption that you might make is that he speaks a language other than English. When I first met Corey, he had come to the United States with his mom. He was born here in the US. At the age of 9 months old, his mom and dad decided to send him back to China to live with family. They did that because they own a restaurant and they were pursuing the American dream, and they knew that they didn't have the time that they needed to give Corey the childhood that they knew he could have if he went back to China. So Corey flew back to China with an aunt and lived in China with his aunt until he was 4 years, 9 months old. He then came back to Byron Center, where he enrolled in kindergarten, and I had the opportunity to be his teacher. Corey, at that time, knew less than 10 words of English. He truly was an English language learner. And so it was important for me to know Corey and to know his story, because looking at Corey, I wouldn't have known any of that. As the school year progressed, Corey was not progressing. Acquiring a second language was very difficult for him. We had the expectation that he would leave kindergarten reading independently, and he wasn't progressing towards that benchmark or goal. So I had a choice. I could get angry and frustrated that Corey wasn't progressing. I could start blaming Corey's parents because they weren't reading with him at home. They weren't helping him progress. Or I could think about Corey and his story. Corey's parents didn't know English. There was no way for them to help him read. They didn't know the words on the paper as much as Corey didn't know the words on the paper. And so instead of blaming his parents, we invited them in. His parents own a restaurant. They work from the minute they wake up until the minute the restaurant closes. When Corey leaves school, he goes directly to the restaurant, and he stays at the restaurant until the restaurant closes. There's not a lot of opportunity for Corey to read. And so I had a choice. I could blame Corey, or I could do something about it. And so I chose to do something about it. I invited Corey to stay after school every day for 15 to 20 minutes, and we read together. And was that a huge gift? No. Would it make an impact? I didn't know. But I knew that I had to do something about it. Since Corey is no longer my student, I've been able to continue to grow a relationship with him and with his family. So every Wednesday night, I leave wherever I'm at, and I go to the restaurant, and I pick Corey up. And Corey has taught me a lot of things. I can't assume. I don't know. Corey is the first person in his family to learn how to swim. He celebrated that milestone about a month ago, and that happened because every other Wednesday we go to the Y and we practice swimming together. And at first, he wouldn't even go in the water. He had a life jacket on, and he was holding on to me for dear life. And we, every week, were able to take one step closer and closer to him, finally being able to swim the full length of a pool, tread water for a minute, and jump in unassisted. When that event happened, I was elated. I called my wife, I called Sandy, his mentor. We went back to the restaurant, and I was so excited to share with his parents what had happened. And we got back to the restaurant and told Gao and Tao, his parents, and they looked at us and they smiled. Because in their culture, excellence is an expectation. Corey learning to swim is expected. So at first I was really frustrated. Like, how could Gao and Tao not be as excited as I was about Corey learning how to swim? And I recognized I started making assumptions again. I assumed that the same things that I valued and believe should be the same things that Gao and Tao value and believe. So much like Corey, each of us has a story. We have lived experiences. We have knowledge that we bring into this space, much like our students. And so it's important for us to bring those stories, bring those lived experiences, bring that background knowledge to the Math Network, because we are a community that values all voices. Activating background knowledge is an instructional activity that most or all of us are probably familiar with. It's also an instructional activity that, when done with purpose, can bring equitable outcomes. When we activate the knowledge of our learners, when we tell them that we value what they're bringing to our learning space, we're telling them that they belong. You belong. You're here today for a reason. And so in order to allow us to enter into this space, to share our voice, we're going to think about where we've been this year. We started talking about equity and equality. We talked about how teacher discourse moves might be a way to interrupt patterns of thinking or patterns of equity and equality. We've also talked about independent and dependent learners. And so what we're hoping to do today is to illuminate the lived experiences, the knowledge that you bring into this space. What stories might you be bringing with you? The way that we're going to do that is if you turn to page 3 in your packet. I stand corrected. Page 4. You'll notice the list of terms. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but what we'll invite you to do is we will invite you to individually read through this list. While you're reading through, there's some prompts on the screen that will invite you to individually think about. You can write on that page. The last page in your packet is also blank if you'd like to journal some ideas there. We're just going to ask you to activate your prior knowledge. What lived experiences, what learning are you bringing with you today? The way that we'll know you've had enough think time is when your pens or pencils stop moving and they're horizontal on your table. That'll just be a sign to us that you've had enough individual think time. Once we notice that most of the room is ready, we'll then engage in the next step in this process. What are you bringing to the Math Network? Who are you? Happy reflecting. We're meant to be, and that's the perfect place to be. What we'll do next to continue to activate our prior knowledge and co-construct learning is, in just a moment, we are going to invite you to stand up, make eye contact with somebody whom you might not yet know, and you are going to have the opportunity to introduce yourself, share who you are, where you work, what your role might be, and share a connection that you're making. So what learning that we've experienced together previously might be connecting to one of the learning intentions and success criteria. The reason that we're doing this is to allow all of us to enter into this space and to continue to allow us to expand our professional learning network. We'll know that you've had enough time to pause, paraphrase, pause, and inquire when you are back in your original seat. Those of you that are sitting at a smaller table, we would encourage you when returning to your seat to join a group. Make your groups larger than 2 or 3 so that you can co-construct knowledge together. So to review, in just a moment we'll stand up, make eye contact with somebody, share a connection, pause, paraphrase, pause, and inquire. What questions might we have? In order to allow all of our voices to be heard, we are going to continue to illuminate the knowledge, the experiences that are living in the room. The way that we're going to do this is, in just a minute, one person in your table group will have the opportunity to very efficiently construct a triple track diagram. So this will be a 3-circle Venn diagram that will allow your group to capture some thinking throughout our morning together. The 3 circles in your Venn diagram will represent the 3 learning intentions and success criteria from our day together. So each circle will coincide with a learning intention and success criteria. You'll see a model on the screen. This is a model, not an exemplar, so it is not an exhaustive list. This is going to be a messy process. So my table's thinking is going to be different than Aubrey's tables group's thinking because my lived experiences are different than the people at Aubrey's table group, who are different than Molly Carl's table group. All of our Venn diagrams will look different based upon what's resonated with us throughout the year. Once you have decided who is going to construct your Venn diagram, that person will then get to choose who in the group will get to start standing and sharing first. So the protocol that we're going to engage in is every person, to allow all voices to enter into the space, will have the opportunity to stand and share a connection they're making between our previous learning and the learning intentions and success criteria. One example might be that with our first learning intention and success criteria of our own behaviors and identity, if I identify as a facilitator, one of the things that I might do is ask mediative questions. Another thing I might do if I identify as a facilitator is I might pause. The grain size is up to you. You get to determine what goes in your Venn diagram. This is for all voices to enter the room and to have a say in the co-constructed knowledge. We will continue to build on this as we move throughout our morning.
So we're being clear that this is a messy process. Generally, us as math people, we want to know the answer. There is no correct answer here. The purpose is to just co-construct knowledge and unpack thinking together. And a scaffold that we might use to help us, your learning intentions and success criteria are on your table to support your Venn diagrams.
Success for us looks like a Venn diagram being constructed in the center of our table group, and every single person at our table group having an opportunity to stand and share uninterrupted. What questions might we have about the next 12-ish minutes of construction and collaboration time? Thank you for taking an opportunity to allow your voice and the voices of your colleagues enter the space and be valued in this space. Knowing that we are a community of learners, we're now going to hear from some of the knowledge and lived experiences in the room. We have three representatives who were voluntold. So Lori Rush, might you be willing to start? What connections was your table group making?
The big idea that we noticed is most of what was shared seems to fit in the inside areas because a lot of the ideas affect more than one of our learning intentions. One of the specific ideas is that a teacher's beliefs in their or beliefs regarding their students' learning and how they value all that student thinking in turn affects how the students see themselves. So the responses that are given to what the students are sharing, that positioning, in turn helps them see themselves as valued mathematical thinkers.
Your table group noticed a lot of interconnectedness between the terms and between the three learning intentions and success criteria. And you also noted that our actions, whether verbal or nonverbal, impact our students and the identities that they hold. Thank you. Jess, might you be willing to represent your table group next? Or Karen, or Adaptive.
As voluntold. So we too see a lot of commoners sitting right in the middle of all three of those circles. We also noticed that when we're looking at student identity, as someone else had just said, that having students see themselves as flexible thinkers and see themselves as mathematicians.
It's important as human beings that our learners see themselves as learners. And when they hold that identity, they're able to hold values and beliefs that align with that. And last but not least, Tracy.
Our people talked about just how teachers' intentionality and planning really falls into all three of the circles. Just how being intentional reflects our identity in that we know that it's meaningful, that it's important. By choosing selection of tasks that are digging deeper at student learning, shows our students for their own identity that we know that they can do it, and designing something for them at a level that they're at. And then for the third one, that it's not just about the content, but getting them to have a deep conceptual understanding versus just plowing through the material.
We believe that all students can, and we need to connect with them as human beings in order for them to feel safe and to take risks. So, who are we? Why are we doing this? And why are we doing this in this way? Are we doing things we've always done because it feels comfortable for us? Or are we trying something new that has a purpose? Rusty is now going to provide us an opportunity to build on the learning and experiences that have entered the room this morning.
One of the pieces of feedback that you all provided us in the last opportunity that we had in day 4 was that you really appreciated the opportunity to think about and learn about independent and dependent learners. Hence, this is another topic for our agenda. Know that we're continually unpacking these terms, and the purpose of the next bit of our dialogue today is to continue our conversation and unpacking of these terms. And what this might look and sound like. We have our learning intentions, the 3 for today that you have begun conversation around. We will continue to have those as the center of our dialogue as we unpack independent learning. Independent learning, as defined by the Thinking Collaborative, can be thought of as having 3 specific things. So as a learner, if I am an independent learner, I am able to self-manage, self-monitor, and self-modify. Self-manage, self-monitor, and self-modify. Self-managing can be thought of, do or does the learner take responsibility for their behaviors and their well-being? Self-monitoring, does the learner have the ability to think about where they are currently in their learning, where they want to go, and how they might begin to close that gap? And last but not least, Thinking Collaborative says that self-modifying is a trait of an independent learner. Meaning, when we experience challenge, obstacles, problems, do we have mental maps to get unstuck, to continue pushing forward, to persevere in problem solving? These 3 terms are terms that we'll use to center our thinking around what it means to be an independent learner. You should be asking yourself, why do we want to do those things? 3 items for our why that we'll lift up for the conversation today. The first is developing in learners habits of mind and cognitive skills to be able to problem solve. As you all know, many of us have experienced obstacles and problems this morning. You have mental maps to work around those. You don't let those obstacles and problems stop you from getting to where you want to be. Learners need to have opportunities and experiences to develop mental maps. 2, the thought of an independent learner isn't simply a K-12 thing that we would like to have conversation around. Independent learners are for all human beings. Do we as adults have the characteristics and traits of an independent learner? So the beauty of the conversation around independent learning is it applies to all of us. In our context, in school classrooms, if I'm a leader in a building, it applies to me because my job is to develop independent learning capacity in the staff that I serve. Independent learning is for all. We'll have opportunities to reflect on our ability to learn independently, where we are as human beings and adults, where we want to be, and what steps we're taking to get there. Last but not least is a recent book by Zaretta Hammond identifies independent learning, which we read a piece of that last time and we'll continue that conversation today. Talks about independent learning and developing these skill sets in learners as a tool for disrupting patterns. So often in education, we talk about gaps. And if I am a student who we are placing a label on as having a gap, oftentimes we in the United States provide them dependent opportunities where we over-scaffold and we over-support them in their learning. And so what the reading that we read last time and we'll continue to read today will help us unpack why might it be important for us as adults to serve students in developing their capacity to learn independently. And the way that we're going to do that as we step back, the next bit of time will be an opportunity for us to reflect individually and then engage in a third point of reading to widen our perspective. And third, co-construct again on our Venn diagram. Reflect, widen perspective, co-construct. We hope that the reflection and the conversation around a third point will allow us to add new items and new thinking to our group's construction. And we'll begin with our first opportunity to reflect individually. The last page of your packet, like the back of that thing, is blank unless you've had an opportunity to write some things on it. This will be a perfect space for you to brainstorm a couple of focus questions that we'll have. You'll notice that the next two tiles are opportunities for you to reflect. There are 3 focusing questions on each for you. The first that we will take 2 minutes individually and silently to jot items around are centered around your identity, behaviors, around your students. The prompts are on the screen. We'll invite you to brainstorm individually. As you finish your last sentence, we'll begin to transition to the next piece for you to reflect around. Prior to doing that, you just had an opportunity to brainstorm how you might influence those you serve. If you are a teacher, you influence students. If you are a leader in a building or a district, you influence adults and students. Some ways that you might produce or help people become more independent are questioning. What questions are you asking? How are you pushing people forward through your questions? Allowing collaboration in classrooms, in buildings. Collaboration is a way that we can encourage independent learning. Choice. How are we as adults providing choices in our learning, and how are we providing students choice in their learning? You've just had an opportunity to reflect on your journey. Reflection is another tool that we use to produce independent thinking. As we step out of thinking about us in service to others, let's think about ourselves for a minute. As adults, we are learners. The next prompts will allow us to think about, in what ways might I be an independent learner? 2 minutes, feel free to brainstorm individually. Just had an opportunity to think about where we are in service to others and where we are as a server to ourselves. We hope that we as adults have opportunities to self-manage, own our behaviors and well-being, self-monitor, think about where I am in my journey and where I want to go, and take the initiative to get there. As we move forward, we're going to continue to widen our perspective around independent and dependent learners. The way that we will do that is to read in our packets pages 5 and 6. We will invite you to annotate that text any way that you wish, and we'll simply engage in a process that is think, pair, share. That might look and sound like me reading individually and constructing a summary or thoughts or important ideas from the text, so that when I have the opportunity to talk with someone, I have my thoughts organized so that I can share in a productive way. There are, for us, after you finish reading, 3 prompts that might scaffold you into the reflection. After you finish reading individually and annotating any way that you wish, and you and a partner are ready, feel free to gently begin to pair and share. With that said, know that someone has to be the first person to talk, so feel free. What questions might we have about the next bit of time? Happy reading and sharing. Our perspective through a third point. We've done that individually and with a partner or trio. And now we'll continue to widen our conversation to that of our group. On the screen, you'll notice a prompt at the top left. I'll invite you to read. Our second learning intention is reflection around our behaviors and how they might impact or influence those we serve. We'll have an opportunity to use that prompt and the dialogue you just had to continue to co-construct items in your Venn diagram. The process that we will utilize to do so is different than the one that is on the screen. So, we're going to leave it a little bit more open. So you have authority and autonomy in the process that you would like to choose to co-construct, with success being our norm of collaboration focus for today. So we hope to pay attention to ourselves and others, meaning we will balance our participation and ensure everyone has an opportunity to contribute. We will restrain our impulses to jump in and interrupt someone's speech. And we will maintain our awareness of our group by stepping up to the balcony as a productive group member and thinking about how we are currently operating. You all have the mental maps to make the next 8 minutes of time very, very productive. We'll invite you to seize that opportunity. Again, prompts are on the screen. You have reading. We are continuing to co-construct and add items to our Venn diagram. What questions might we have? Have fun. So learning and servicing learning is messy. So we're not done. However, we've had opportunities to continue to widen our perspective, and that is our purpose of today. We're going to take an opportunity just to surface a couple of things that might have come up in conversation. And I know that we have one person who has agreed to share, and we'll be looking for 2 others. So who might be willing to add on to the conversation around the things that were swirling around at your table? One, 2. Thank you. Nick?
One of the ideas that we spoke about was the collaboration within our classrooms, how that aligns with, or how that creates for the students the opportunity to enter the conversation at smaller levels, kind of like here, rather than just passing the microphone to one person, you gave us a chance to discuss this first and gain some confidence in our ideas and get our ideas valued and shared before then bringing it back to the whole group.
Thank you, Nick. An opportunity to think individually, small group, and then a larger group is a scaffold for us as individuals to be more confident and collaborative. Thank you. Melissa, I'll hand it to you since I'm close so Andrew can make his way to the back. Yeah, we're going Nick, 2, then 1.
We overall talked about just that big idea of growth mindset. We know it's not rocket science, but it's so important and so critical. And one example of that growth mindset is just normalizing productive struggle with students, that it's not a bad thing, that it's normal.
Thank you. And?
One of the things that we talked about was just having that awareness of the classroom and the feel of your students as you go through a lesson and the awareness of the content to be able to, we related it to the third learning intention about how what we teach is bigger than just math, and if you're having a good discussion, or if you're having, if the kids are really involved and engaged in the discussion, then you're going to keep it there and let them focus more on the discussion aspects than worrying about what problems or practice that you're going to get to later. And just being able to be aware of that in your classroom and focus on those good moments to help your class out as a whole and not just in math.
Thank you. So we teach learners to be independent. It reminds me of what Marcus surfaced earlier. We teach the person first things. As we continue to move forward, we'll have an opportunity to continue to reflect on who we are, why we are doing the things that we're doing, and why we're doing them in this way. Our journey this morning is one that will continue to allow us space to construct understanding. The next item on our agenda is collective teacher efficacy, and Marcus is going to go ahead and get the party started.
I thought the party already started, Russ.
And show us some dance moves.
Got it quicker. So as we transition to our last learning intention and success criteria, it's important that we think about the students that we serve. So if you'll go with me quickly on a journey back a couple years ago when I was an Algebra 2 facilitator. And I walk out in the hall during my planning period and I see a student whom they call Logan outside. He's not in my class, but I saw Logan, who was a sophomore taking geometry, and he was outside in the hallway. And I thought to myself, this is a student I'm going to have next year. I'm going to look at this as a challenge and see what type of relationship I can build with Logan. So I went over there, and you know how kids, they're sitting in the hall, they're excited to talk to anybody, right? So I planted a seed with Logan, just, hey, how you doing? I hope the rest of your day goes well. I just left it. He was a little bit leery, you know, why are you talking to me? You're not my teacher. So as the year goes by, I keep seeing Logan in the hallway, and I say hi. Sometimes he responds, sometimes he doesn't, but I keep trying. So the beginning of Algebra 2, Logan comes in, and I notice him as a learner in this space now. He doesn't see himself as a learner. He doesn't see himself as being a part of the community. Students aren't sitting by him, and no one wants to be in his group. So my hunch was correct on when I saw him as a sophomore. So I continued to deposit energy and emphasis into him being a learner and a part of this community by sharing good news. Sometimes Logan didn't share good news, but we did our best to pull it out of him in the whole group. And this is an Algebra 2 physics class, so there were roughly 50 students in there. It was a co-taught class. It was a scary space to be vulnerable. So I kept making deposits into who Logan was and what his identity was, and it slowly started to unpack, and he became more comfortable. And I learned that Logan really liked dirt bikes. I don't know much about dirt bikes, but I know a little bit about four-wheelers, so we just start having conversations about where he rides and what type of 125 he's riding, and it didn't matter, right? He started to see that I was genuinely caring about him as a person, and then he started to formulate his identity a little bit different. And it wasn't just me, but it took the collective. We had to establish that culture of what it's like to accept all students in that space. So the year goes by a little bit further, and Logan seems to be a little bit more comfortable. He still doesn't see himself as a learner, but he's getting by, right? But more importantly, he started to see himself as a part of the culture. Students then started working with Logan. We supported scaffolds and expectations on what it means to accept and work productively in spaces. And Logan had that clarity, and he started engaging in the learning in that space. So about 3/4 of the way through Algebra 2, towards the end of the year, we're having good news with everybody, and somehow it pops up that this big, tough 17-year-old kid who likes to ride dirt bikes, he has a pet bird. I had no idea. But it comes up in front of 50 students. And I'm thinking, this is going to go one way or the other. Logan is either going to be vulnerable and share his background and something that maybe is sensitive to him that kids could interpret differently. Or he could turn back. He could turn back out of that community and just close down. And it was really great to see that I did not get involved, the other facilitator did not get involved, but the students wanted to hear Logan's story about his bird, and so we let it go. And I'm getting chills as I'm telling this because Logan pulled out his phone and he started sharing stories about his bird as students were standing up around him. And at this point, who cares about mathematics? Logan sees himself as a part of the community of learners. He might not hold the identity as a learner, but he's a part of this community. And that is success. So after Logan graduated, I hadn't heard from him, so he was a senior and I was in a different position. Logan graduated. I went back for graduation. I didn't see him there, so I wondered. Another year goes by, and it was a few months ago, actually I ran into our teacher consultant over lunch, and he brought up, hey, have you heard about how Logan's doing? I said, no, what's going on? He said he's doing fantastic. He's working at a car dealership detailing cars. He's got his own apartment. He's paying his own bills. He's got a girlfriend. He's really happy with how things are going. Does he know the Algebra 2 content? I don't know, but I don't really care. He saw himself as a part of the community. He knew how to work productively in that space, and he held a different identity as he progressed through those years. That's why we do what we do for students. And as we transition into this last portion of our learning, we're holding students as the pinnacle of the work that we do. That's why we became teachers, to support people. So as we transition to our last learning intention and success criteria, how are we building students' agency in themselves, not just mathematics? So what this is going to look like is we'll have an opportunity to see actions at the classroom level. What connections are you making to what we're going to see in this video? How do you see yourself in that space? What are some of those productive moves that might act as a model for us moving forward? And then secondly, we might learn a little bit more about this member and their journey this year as an independent learner. And that can serve several purposes. It can act as a model for what it might look like for us to be independent learners in this space and back in our buildings. It gives us consciousness around how the thinking that takes place in here might ultimately impact students' identity as well. How are we impacting the system and individual students? So as we transition forward, let's hold in our mind the focus of this conversation is students through the lens of who we have to be to impact our students. So on page 7 of your packet, there's a few details regarding success criteria, learning intentions, and a transcript from this dialogue. So individually read through page 7 and engage in a conversation with an elbow partner around the prompts. What is the teacher doing? What successes are we seeing from students as they orient to that learning goal? And then lastly, our focus question. In what ways might these behaviors of the teacher positively influence students' relationship with mathematics? So first we're going to read individually, Success looks like us having conversation around each of the prompts on the screen with an elbow partner. And know that I'll be back in this space with my hand in the air when we're going to come back together in roughly 5 minutes. We've likely made a lot of assumptions about this teacher, who they are, why they did the moves that they did. And our next step is to create more context. And the purpose is to see the connection between how our morning is connected to the afternoon, how our identity is connected to our behaviors and skills. So we're going to take an opportunity to provide more context by the use of video for this portion of the lesson. I ask that you see yourself in this space. What connections are you making? How does this feel similarly to your class? So we'll go ahead and transition to the short video. Thank you, Rusty.
Pressure. Is that where we want it?
No, at the beginning.
Okay.
Before you go to work time, on your paper that you did some work on, I want you to just jot down, what do you see as the relationship between our two-dimensional shapes and our three-dimensional shapes? What did you notice? And when we worked from a two-dimensional shape to a three-dimensional shape, what's that relationship? Remember, that was our goal. How are those related? Write that down on the paper you were doing work on. Put it in the basket for me. Okay? You may go ahead and go to work time after you have that written down.
So a few connections were made between the problem strings breakout and what was happening. Remember our goal. How is this connected to our goal? There are a few moves in there that were similar. So as we move forward, you'll notice in just a second, Bethany and Andrew are going to have the opportunity to have a reflective conversation in front of you. However, as we move forward, it's important to understand a few other things. That Bethany enjoys playing volleyball. A few of her boys enjoy playing baseball, so her summers are busy. She's got a favorite book. Mondays are never coming. She likes to bake banana bread. 4th of July is her favorite holiday, of course, because it's in the summer and it's generally warm. She's taught both in a K-4 building in Byron Center and is currently in a 7-8 building. These are a few things that we know about Bethany from the surface level. And we'll have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about Bethany's experience this year and how her identity and behaviors have been impacted throughout her reflective process for the year. So, Andrew, I'll pass it over to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Bethany. Knowing that you have been a part of the Math Network in previous years, and this year brought change in terms of your role, what successes have you been able to experience? What learning have you transferred back to you as a result of your learning from here at Math Network?
So my learning here at Math Network, it really helped me focus in on recognizing my identity as a teacher and pinpointing my values and beliefs that I was holding, and how that transfers into the student's identity in my classroom. And I do a variety in my classroom. I have an opportunity to teach both English and math. And so what I learned from here transferred to all of my classroom. And it was something that was applicable. I didn't just take it back to my math hours. I could do both. Probably one of the biggest takeaways was looking at the kids in my classroom through the lens of the fact that all students can learn, and to not make those assumptions about kids, but to really focus on connecting with each one before we even started that learning of the content.
You've really valued the time and space here at Math Network to reflect on your own identity, and that process has allowed you to not only reflect on yourself, it's also allowed you the opportunity to reflect on how your actions and behaviors are impacting the students in your classroom. Can you maybe share a little bit about, you said that in your classroom, It's important that all students are successful. What might success look and sound like, knowing you have the opportunity to be flexible and teach both math and language arts? What has success looked and sounded like in that space this year?
Success in math has been through a lot of facilitating problem strings, using 3-act tasks. Success to me in that classroom and in that environment is to be able to facilitate conversations between the students and watch them bring to the surface different understandings about whatever content we're focused on at that point. The success is not only the understanding of the content, but the fact that they feel safe enough to engage with the content and work together to uncover what it is that they're working on. In English, success for me, most recently an example is we did some research projects and allowing them to present on what they researched and having students come up and say like, I want to present on drug overdosing epidemics because I don't know if it's safe for school, but my mom's an addict and I'm worried. So giving them that space has been powerful.
So a result of your deep reflection around identity and beliefs has allowed you to be really intentional with the behaviors that you have transferred back to your classroom. You named holding the identity of facilitator and being able to pose questions. You also named the importance of choice in your learning environment. Your students have choice in the strategies they use in math, and they have choice in what they present on in English language arts and what they read in English language arts. Knowing that you've had the opportunity to teach kindergarten and now the opportunity to teach middle school, what similarities in terms of your behaviors might there be between your experiences in kindergarten and your experiences in middle school?
When I taught kindergarten, it was, that one of those first experiences, and so helping them build an identity as a learner, giving them those opportunities, those exposures, those experiences, so that hopefully when every kid left for first grade, they viewed themselves as a learner and that they were capable of engaging the material and being successful. I feel like it's the exact same with middle school. A lot of the kids who I see mixed into my classrooms perhaps don't see themselves as learners anymore. So it's trying again to build that identity, especially as I'm releasing them off into high school. It's again a big jump. So just trying to help them identify as people who can engage in the classroom and have valuable thoughts and can be successful.
A pattern you're noticing is that regardless of grade level, it's important to take time and space to establish trust and rapport with your learners so that you are truly able to connect with them on the level of a human being before connecting with them around content. And so that thinking has allowed you to really deeply consider the impact that your actions have on student identity. As you think about your year, you made a choice. You came to this learning space and you were able to identify yourself as an independent learner. What thinking might you have around why you decided to make those choices? Why is it important to you to transfer that learning back to your students?
I think my students deserve the best opportunities possible. And so in order to do that, I need to continue to challenge myself and to continue to learn, to dig deeper, to give them the best opportunities possible. I recognize this year that I've always kind of had these values and beliefs, but never really took the time to sit and be specific and intentional about figuring out exactly what they were. And so by having that, I'm able to be more intentional and purposeful in my planning in the classroom and know that what I'm doing is impacting the kids, and I can focus on their identities more and giving them a platform.
You experienced adaptive change this year, and as a result of those adaptive changes, you were able to make some technical changes in your classroom by implementing problem strings, and that has impacted your students' identities. Knowing that there's lots of opportunities to learn and lots of places you could be spending your time and your energy, why might it be important for you to continue to be a part of the Math Network? And why might it be important for you to be a catalyst for change back in your building?
Belonging to this network allows me to make connections to people in other districts that I might not be able to make without this. It is important to me because I feel like what this network brings is something that I can understand, I can learn about it, but then it's very applicable to what I can do in my classroom. So the afternoon, I'm in the problem strings section, I can take that home and I can implement that, and so that makes a big difference. What I've been doing in my school is when I take those things back, whether it's number talks, I did those from last year, or whether it's the problem strings, when we sit down at our PLC and we're discussing some of the options, I can say to the rest of the department, hey, have you tried this? Or I learned about this, and I can really bring that back, and they can come do peer observations and learn about that. They've been very open to that, so that's been extremely helpful. Next year I have a couple of them that are coming with me, so it's been good.
You appreciate this time and space as a way for you to reflect on your own journey, and you also value the technical shifts that you've been able to bring back to the people in your district. You value being a lead learner and know that action is required to interrupt the status quo. Bethany, in what ways might this conversation have impacted your thinking?
So I think as a teacher, it's easy to reflect on a lesson. It's easy to reflect on, when my kids' reflections like this at the end of a problem string, it's constantly, where am I going next based on those assessments that I do with those kids. But you don't often have that time like this to sit down and really face these questions and reflect on what you're doing. Like that kind of just falls to the wayside with our busy schedules. So it just kind of firms up, makes it a little more concrete exactly what this process has meant to me this year and how it's helped me out.
We can take time to pause as individuals. However, we fall into a pattern of thinking when we pause by ourselves, and you value taking time to pause with others so that you can reflect more deeply on your year. Thank you, Bethany, for being vulnerable this morning.
So knowing that it's important for us to take the time to pause. And at this time, we'll ask you to move internal and process the implications of this experience. This experience being the conversation today, but more importantly, the implications of this year at MichME for you. What connections are you making? What implications does this have for you in the classroom? What implications might this have for you and your identity? And what implications might this have for students? So we're going to take a moment to pause and allow our minds to flow freely and record some of our thinking on that last sheet in the packet. And then we'll ask a few of you to share. What implications does this experience have for you and for your students? We're going to have two share out. We thought it might be valuable to have the voice of a building leader in this space as well. So, Chris, would you mind sharing what implications this has had for you, or what might be circling in your mind?
It's on.
That's fine. I think as we've continued now, our second full year of going through, is the piece that continues to circle through our building and the conversation, and it's conversations Marcus and I have had as well, is about the whole aspect of leveraging what we're doing to a larger mass of people who aren't. Frequently, we run into that challenge within education where if we really wanted to disrupt and interrupt the status quo, it'd be awesome to like shut down for a month and then like disrupt and then reopen, like a grand reopening type thing. Parents tend to frown upon that. When we tried it this winter with the polar vortex, it didn't work real well. So I think the opportunity only to select staff members who are interested and passionate to be here and figuring out how do we leverage that conversation that they're having and the way that their thinking is being pushed to people who aren't present when trying to move kind of a larger entity forward. And so that continues to be, I think, our challenge. We've done a combination of this and some of the blended coaching, and we were just talking this morning about the two experiences and what has evolved those educators, and what does it look like if one of those two experiences is missing, and what it looks like if both those experiences are missing, and what it does to other teachers. And so I guess that's what's been circling through my mind as we look at that more holistically.
So from a building leader and district leader perspective, you are viewed as the catalysts for change for your students. Your building and district leaders are looking at you to carry that message forward, to impact culture. Thank you for sharing. And Shelley, would you mind sharing?
I did.
I get to follow my own principal here. I teach 5th grade in Sparta. I've taught 5th grade in Sparta for 24 years. This is my last year of retiring. We decided that in October, after I already had come back for my second year. Love MichME. I sort of came in through a side door, started LCN, begrudgingly. LCN, I picked all the mathy technical things I could pick at LCN, and that's how I found this group, so that was really awesome. I really felt empowered by the conversations that I was having here to try things that maybe I would never have tried before. And last year I tried to do workshop. I met someone from Hudsonville that had been doing workshop with math expressions. I could imagine how that worked. I tried it last year, failed miserably, and but it started with number talks, and just that the kids loved that, and watched their learning happen, and was encouraged by that. So this year I was like, I'm all about number talks. I'm going to do workshop if it kills me. And this year's group just really didn't like number talks at all. They just thought that was the worst thing. And I was really fighting with kids about homework, and I thought, all right, why am I fighting with kids about homework? Why am I fighting with kids? Why am I sending emails home? So I decided I'm not going to send homework home anymore. So in workshop, they got their homework done in class, and then I sent home little review things or something that they'd done before that wasn't new learning. And the days are just fabulous. No, they're not just fabulous because I'm retiring and I'm relishing every moment, but they're fabulous. I'm not arguing with any 10-year-old anymore about why their homework isn't done. They're not coming in with a poor attitude because they know they didn't do their homework. And really it was from figuring out who I was as an educator, finding my identity. Sure, I'm a teacher, but it's the relationships that I like the most, and we heard that word. In fact, we're keeping a tally, like a drinking game about that, where we hear about relationships, but it's so true. And so I'm leaving with all of this wonderful knowledge, and leaving with all of this realization that once I quit worrying about the rest of the things and the stuff that everybody was doing, and I broke some patterns and just started really focusing on what the kids needed, the learning has just been amazing this year. And the encouragement from this group has really helped me to keep on track and do what I feel is really the best thing for those kids. So, so thanks for the encouragement.
Students are at the center of everything that we do, and we have the responsibility to be reflective learners and change our practice to meet their needs. Thank you, Shelley, for sharing. So where that leads us going forward, knowing that we're reaching the end of our time this morning, is that we have structures for next year taking place. So if you or your team are interested in joining for MichME next year, this is a live bit.ly, so bit.ly, 1920 MichME. Registration is open. Know that next year, our focus will be around the Taking Action series from NCTM. For those of you that aren't familiar with that series, Principles to Action is a much more philosophical approach and beliefs of what should take place. Taking action are the pieces that are underneath that. What do these practical steps look like to bring these to life? So you'll notice that when you register for next year, you'll have the option to select what grade band you're a part of, and that will depend on what book you will be receiving for next year's structure. So please reach out to us if you have any questions about that, either through conversation or emailing us at math.kentisd.org. We'd be happy to support you and your leadership team. And also a comment on breakouts. Those are being solidified as well. We've sent out invitations, but we're not quite ready to share those items out because they're, as Andrew would say, is wet cement right now. Wet cement. And Rusty's going to share our last two portions of the agenda in a very efficient manner.
It's all about efficiency. We're going to have an opportunity to provide feedback as we have the last few mornings. So we'll invite you to take out a device and complete a short-ish opportunity to provide feedback. The bit.ly is on the screen. As usual, we will be monitoring the number of submissions, and when we reach a number that are in the room, we will know that we're ready to move on to the last portion of our conversation. So we'll invite you to do that now. You are still typing, and that's important for you to continue to finish and hit submit. We do want to begin the process of sending us off on a positive note to lunch because we are about at that time. Prior to doing so, we did have Shelley mention that she was retiring. I wonder if we might have anybody else in the room who has dedicated their life to students and who would be in the process of having this be their last year in the classroom. If this is your last year and you are retiring, would you please stand for us? No, you too. No, it's not. Two things, knowing those two people decently well. Shelley, you've heard her story a little bit. She is a master at what she would say, or she wouldn't say, is helping every single kid in her classroom reach success. If you would like to chat with somebody how to get every student to succeed, Shelley is a perfect model for that. The other person who stood, Mark Thompson, I'll call Mr. Thompson today because he was my high school math teacher. And so I just wanted to put that in the room, that he had a huge influence on me and where I am today, and that's the impact that all of you are having on those you serve. We hope that you have a great lunch, and we'll see you back at the ESC this afternoon.